Hello, welcome back to the course. In this chapter, we're going to look at the Italian with fourth move h6. That's after e4, e5, bishop knight f3 first, knight c6, bishop c4, knight f6, d3, h6. The idea is that black is going to develop the bishop to g7, the so-called fianchetto. After d6, most likely followed by g6 or g5. Now black could still develop the bishop to e7 or to c5. But the question is then, why did he start with h6? In this chapter, we're going to look only at the fianchetto. Because let's say if castle bishop c5, we will transpose to the bishop c5 Italian chapters, while bishop e7 will transpose to bishop e7 Italian chapters. So here we'll only look at g5, g6, and d6 here. Now g5 or g6 before d6 is premature. We go d4. That's also why we start with castle and not with c3. Because if we start with c3, and g5, d4 is far less clear. But after castle, g5, d4 is pretty good for white. d6 black just cannot do, because after de he will lose the pawn. Let's say d queen d8, he either loses this pawn or that pawn. True, the black can take on e4, but after rook e1 it just doesn't work in the end. So d4 ed, the best shot. Now we go e5. d5. There is this variation called the Scotch Gambit. That's here after 3 d4 ed. That's the Scotch, and bishop c4, the Scotch Gambit. f6 e5 d5. That is fine for black, but here black has h6 g5 included, which is kind of a big deal, very weakening. Bishop b5, knight e4. If knight d7, we play rook e1. Bishop g7, take, and knight d4. And knight c6 is kind of an issue. So knight e4 here, knight d4, bishop d7, and now the black will have to pay the price for these weakenings after bishop c6, bc, knight c3. This is the simplest. Knight d2 is also possible to trade the knight away, but this is the simplest. Knight c3, take, and after c5 we don't go back, allowing black to block this e6 square, but we go e6, opening the files. And the point is that after bishop e6, knight e6, f8, rook e1. If let's say queen d7, we have queen h5 check. So these weaknesses finally do tell. And if queen e7 instead, move 15, we have bishop a3, keeping queen h5 in reserve. And yeah, the position is very, very bad for black. If bishop g7, we have a check, king d7, and rook a to d1. Intending rook takes d5, also c4 is an unpleasant threat. Black king is in great danger in the center. So g5, d4 is an issue. Likewise, d4 is an issue as well. e4, knight d4. Black is unable to finish his development without making a concession, because if bishop g7, we have e5 simply. Knight e5 loses material to rook e1. We win the knight on the pin here. So if black should do g5 or g6, he has to go d6 first. If your opponent does g5 or g6, you go d4, and most likely he just, not most likely, but for sure, he just mixed up his move order. d6 is the right way to go, and I've looked at this position quite a bit. I couldn't find a clear refutation of g5, g6, and I think the reason is that, truth be told, our d3 setup is, of course, is very healthy, very sound, but it is a little bit restrained. Restrained is the word I was looking for. A little bit restrained. So, of course, black can afford to make a move like h6 and then even g6 against their setup as restrained as d3. We are slightly better, of course, in various ways. Finally, I've decided, I've tried all sorts of different setups, but I've at some point stumbled upon the setup with the knight on c3. And then I realized that actually that is also the setup I recommend against bishop e7 system instead of h6. So that's actually very consistent. In fact, the philosophy is that we want to bring the knight out to c3 as long as the bishop is not on c5, because the move knight d4 is no longer there. Now after taking, black has to take with the e-pawn, while if the bishop were on c5, he would be taking with the bishop. And so our control of the d5 square by the knight is more important than the the fact that we cannot control this d4 square as well with pawn on c3. So these knights on c3 and c6, they are not exactly symmetric because the bishops aren't. The thing is, we cannot play knight c3 right away, or we can, but that allows knight a5. This is something also to investigate. For example, after bishop d5, c6, bishop f7, king f7, b4. There's a whole world of possibilities. But objectively, black seems to be okay down these lines. So I've decided to play a4 first. Not a new idea for us. If we studied the Italian chapters, bishop wants to retreat after knight a5. And we play knight c3 on the move that follows. Here I looked at g5 and g6. If g5, we go knight c3. We can also play a5, a6 first and then knight c3, but I propose not to confuse ourselves to go knight c3 first. Now g4 is just not good. We go knight h4, knight takes c4. This idea is really bad here. We take with the pawn, very strong, and queen h4. We have knight d5. The c7 pawn is weak, and if queen d8, we open the f file with f3, g3, and f4. And yeah, the diagonal is open for the queen. We are just going to crush here. The king is very weak, and the extra pawn black has brings him no happiness at all. So g4, knight e4 is not a good idea. Bishop g7 is the normal move. Of course, we go a5, grabbing space, castle rook e1. And it's not clear to me how black wants to exploit this far advanced pawn, and it seems to me to be a weakness. If he tries to bring knight across to the king side with knight e7, we strike with d4. And knight on c3 is very well positioned here, and we get to play in the center, while the h6, g5 pawns are just weakening. Instead of bishop g7, bishop g4 is actually very, very clever. Black wants to provoke the move h3. I start with bishop e3. Now, if h3, black goes back bishop e6, and then he has some g4 ideas. And after bishop e3, I just wait one move to see what he does. If knight d4 is just bad, we take knight b5. He's losing a d4 pawn, or if c5, e5 is already crushing, but h3 is even stronger. And then after bishop moves, we have g4 and e5, and just lights out. Knight d4 is bad. Bishop h5 is very clever, hoping for h3. We don't go h3, we play rook e1. A very, very clever idea. Knight d5, on the other hand, is met by knight d4. When after taking, somehow we cannot exploit this pawn, and the pin is quite annoying actually. Rook e1 is very smart, and bishop g7 is natural. And now that the g file is closed, we have a very strong idea knight e2. It's only it's exactly here that it works very well. We don't mind bishop f3 gf. Our king is quite safe, and the knight is going to head towards the f5 square. I looked at this position in great detail. It's a very interesting position. If queen d7, a waiting move, we play knight g3. If d5, we go bishop b5. Likewise, if queen d7, knight g3, d5, we also go bishop b5. So therefore, I check the move a6, intending d5, and now I go b4. Similarly, if queen d7, knight g3, a6, we also go b4. The idea of b4 is very strong. 11 a6 b4. We basically what we do in this position is we want to be ready for the black king to castle either way. If he tries to castle long, we crush with b5. If he tries to castle short, we crush with knight g3 and eventual h4. King is safe nowhere. Obviously, it's also not safe in the center. d5, for example, bishop b3. b5 is also quite enticing. We go bishop b3 here. Knight takes b4. c3. Knight g3 is also possible. But the then position gets quite close with d4, bishop d2, bishop f8, and might be hard to break through. So I propose c3, knight c6, now knight g3. Queen d7, and here very strong a5. Again, we want to anticipate black castling either way. And now if he castles short, we go king h1, we intend rook g1, then queen f1, then knight f5, h4 in some order. We will slowly but surely start a strong attack. The fact that we are down a pawn on the queen side doesn't matter at all at the moment. If long castle, now we play on the queen side with bishop a4, intending to play on the b file, and this nasty pin will tell. Queen e6, rook e2, doubling on the b file like that, very clever. g4, trying to gain some counterplay, doesn't work. Rook b2, gf, queen, rook b1 first, sorry. d4 and rook takes b7. And although it looks like black got some play, actually our play is much more important. We are happy to trade queens after queen h3, queen f1, and then yeah, black has a serious issue here on the queen side. Rook d6, there is also knight f5, all sorts of things. And if rook d3, just queen f1, and actually there is no way to defend from knight e4. Black's position is simply collapsing. For example, rook d8, it's also, excuse me, rook d8 also doesn't help. Knight e4, bishop c6, queen c6, and now just check. King d7 and take on d3. So here black is already just losing actually. Some engines miss this because it's a very complicated line where it looks like black takes a lot of material, but in the end the engines realize that it's winning for white. That's for this knight e2 move. A very, very interesting idea, and also a nice concept to know that when the king is in the center, sometimes you have to be ready for both castlings and play accordingly, not just focus for on the king side with knight g3, king h1 and all that, and he'll go long, not just focus on the queen side because then he'll go short, but to try to keep both options open. 8 bishop g7 is the main move. Now we go h3, bishop h5, intending g4 doesn't work very well. We can start with a5. We can also go knight d5 first, but a5 is clever. g4, black is not in time. We take, and then we go a6, b6, bishop b5, and the pin is too annoying for black to actually get some play on the king side. He will struggle defending here and get rather distracted with the spin. So a6 is normal, and now knight d5. It's very important to trade this knight. Now after g4, knight f6. Without the knight, the bishop is not protected. So let's say move like knight h2 will win us the g4 pawn, as gh is losing to queen takes h5. And if knight d5, bishop d5, queen f6, we have two options. We can play without g4, just c3, allow black to trade on f3, queen f3, queen f3, gf, have a small advantage in the endgame. Doubled pawns are not a disaster. We have the bishop pair, more space on the queen side. Potentially we go h4, getting rid of the h pawn, and these weaknesses don't play that much overall. White is slightly better here, but more ambitious is to go g4, not even allow the endgame. Bishop g6 and now c3. And there's one very pretty line with black playing very inventively. Knight e7, bishop e7, rook b8. Gives up 2 pawns, but after bishop a6, d5, suddenly our bishop is trapped. And we have to sacrifice it, and the computer suggests a very strong way to sacrifice it. Gain us just a little bit of that extra time. Bishop b7. Bishop b7, rook b7, a6. Our pawn is just one step closer. Rook b8 and now knight e5. a7 first is also possible, but knight e5, very strong idea. If queen e5, bishop d4. With knight e5, we have picked up 1, 2, 3, the third pawn, and especially since the a pawn is so far advanced, we are definitely very happy with this position. Yes, I mentioned queen e5, bishop d4. Of course, we pick up the bishop here on g7. Knight bishop e6 is a better attempt. Black wants to establish better control of the d5 square. And now note, we included bishop e3, bishop g7, and this closed the g file for black. So if we had played h3 right away, bishop e6 would have been a better version for black. That's why we included bishop e3 first. It was very smart. a5, we can include a5, a6 very often. We can do that here right now. Bishop e6, fe, and d4. Now g4 doesn't work, we go hg, knight g5, and d5. Now de, gf is okay for black, but hg, knight g4, and d5 is very strong. We leave g7 bishop staring at its pawn, and after ed, knight d5, we have tremendous control of the light squares and a strategically winning position. g4 is bad, ed is main move, knight d4, and now queen d7. Queen d7 is good, guarding the pawn, developing the queen, guarding the knight too. Queen e2, nice neutral move. And now black has 2 options, actually more than 2. Actually, I consider 4 options here, but fundamentally he can either castle short or long. Knight e4 tactic isn't very good. Queen h5 check, nice intermezzo. Yeah, king d8, because if queen f7, nice shot, knight e6, nice tactic there. Good fork here. Difficult one to spot from afar. So queen h5 very important. King e7 loses to queen g6, and king d8, knight c6, queen c6. Here we have a very good compensation. We play queen f7, bishop c3, bc, and the king is stuck. The rook on a8 is out of play. We have some queen g7 ideas, sometimes winning this, say after rook e8, winning this 2 pawns. And if queen e8 can retreat with queen f3, and the knight doesn't have a clear square where it will feel comfortable. White is better here despite being down a pawn. Knight e5 is clever. We go f4 very quickly. G8, bishop f4, castle, and we just take on e5. We don't tolerate the strong knight. d e5 and knight b3. And we have a very, very pleasant position, as the black light pieces are really bad. It's not even so much that we are happy with the doubled pawns, because to be fair, the doubled pawns control the center very well. But it's that the knight on f6 is really bad, and so is the bishop on g7. Had these pieces been well placed, black would have been doing well, but with the pieces so passive, white is doing very well here. f4 is an important move after knight e5 actually. If short castle, we take, knight 6, queen c6, and rook a4. The rook is doing a fantastic job on the 4th rank. It protects the e4 pawn, but also in some variations, after h4, it can join the king side. For example, d5, rook fa1, very strong. If knight e4, we have, let's show it, knight e4, knight e4, d, bishop d4, our rook on a4 is protected. So that was smart. And here, by the way, we would regain the e4 pawn eventually, and then black would be left with a weaker king and a worse pawn structure. Rook a d8, good move keeping the tension, and now h4 very strong. If e5, suddenly the rook swings across all the way from the queen side to the king side. So rook a4 was a very strong idea to keep in mind here. Long castle is the main move, and here rook f d1 is a good useful move. And now we have all sorts of b4, b5 ideas. But it's not so easy after d5. I have looked at this position. There are lots of different ways to play. b4 is my main recommendation, finally. I looked also at e5, knight e5 before. This is a thematic pawn sack. Sort of, by giving up the e-pawn, we sort of keep the center more closed, and we hope to attack on the queen side, and we hope that it comes in fast enough before black gets to set his pawns in motion. This is very risky, of course, for both sides, but it's very interesting. Also, knight c6, queen c6, bishop d4 gives white a small plus, and also c16, rook a b1 even is a move. Knight e4, knight e4, d c3, also small plus, but there was not something that would refute this outright, so I couldn't find a big advantage for white, let's say. Finally, I settled on b4, most natural, knight e4 de, and now there is knight f5, which is very interesting. Bishop a1, rook d7, rook d7, knight g3 is very, very unclear. Black has 2 rooks, which is a lot for a queen, but we do have a safer king currently, with b5 coming in and so on. And also knight f5, black could also play another move. I think it must have been queen f7. Yeah, it's queen f7, I guess. That was also not so clear. Knight b3, much more modest. I like it a lot more. Now it's tempting to play queen f7, after which we go b5. Note that bishop a1 no longer works, because we take the queen and then we take the bishop. Queen f7 is natural. Now we go b5, bishop a1. Yeah, we simply sacrifice in exchange. ab, queen b5, and black is in trouble as knight c5 is coming and his king is weak. That's why it's very strong to play queen d7, bishop c5, and now queen f7. This is very difficult. If queen d7, b5, this doesn't work because of takes, and then he's got queen b4. And after bishop c5, queen f7, again b5 doesn't work, because after takes, he's got knight b8, and we don't have knight c5. He's got the bishop. We've got the bishop on c5. So basically, queen c7, bishop c5, queen f7 is very strong. I think very hard to find as well. But now we just play rook a b1, and after trade, rook d1, rook d8, we trade, king d8, and simply knight d2. And of course, we no longer are able to checkmate him, as without rooks it's going to be very hard. But we just have a small positional advantage as we have a better pawn structure. We're going to have a beautiful knight on e4. Should be a dominant piece. Small advantage here. If black finds all the best moves here. That is for g5. It, by the way, happened in Movsesian Sadvani. Bishop g4 and then even bishop h2, bishop e6. So surprisingly, some games in this rare position. 6g6 is much more solid, also less threatening. Black doesn't push on the king side, but also doesn't create as many weaknesses. Here, knight c3. I should mention a5. Usually, I trust the modern engines, so if they prefer one move, I usually go with that move. But I have to say that this a5 followed by a6 that they recommend, although I look the lines and I understand that white has a small advantage there perhaps, and it's very critical, I still found this to be too complicated to give as my main recommendation. My main recommendation is going to be knight c3, which is much more conceptual for us. We always go for knight c3, a4 setup against systems where bishop is not on c5. So a5, if black goes a6, we're very happy. We just go knight c3 and h3 and bishop e3, our usual setup. And we have a better version having included a5, a6. We're happy. It doesn't have knight a5 move, for example. And also if knight e7 and c5, he weakens b6 square. So this we're happy with, but a5, I was not happy with bishop g7. Now we go a6. First I thought it's great. We gain space, b6 or castle c3, b6, same. If ba, we will have a small edge here, I believe, because the a pawn is a little bit weak. Not a big deal, of course, but especially if black doesn't get counterplay here on the b file. Somehow then we are doing well. But after b6, the position is very strange. So before as possible, the computer suggests rook e1 first. Very smart. Knight a5, bishop a2. Intending before, so bishop a6 before we will regain the pawn with bishop f7, rook a6. So c5 suggested before, knight c6 and b5, knight e7. And I found this position very, very complicated. The engines give white a small plus, though lines become very deep and nuanced. So on one hand, as we learned and got reminded by all the AlphaZero games, white has got this far advanced a pawn, a6 pawn. Now, if the king was somewhere on b8, okay, then I will understand it better. But now with the king being on the other side of the board, the only benefit I see is a very long-term benefit for some kind of hypothetical endgame where we will hypothetically win the a7 pawn and queen our a6 pawn. But honestly, this is such a long way to go. And realistically, the play will be centered likely around the center after some d4 break or kingside after f5 push. And yeah, I found our asset of the a6 pawn to be a little too long-term for a human to comprehend. So, for example, h3, then there is this maneuver knight e8, knight c7. King often goes to h7, then f5. And yeah, these positions are just far too complex to understand, I felt. And if I wanted to recommend it, I would have to give all the different options, and always white has to play differently, and the lines go very far. And I just found this to be a little bit too unpractical for us. So you can definitely research this, and this likely is the most challenging direction, since all the main computers that I'm using right now say this is the way to go. But I decided to recommend knight c3. I think it's a bit more understandable. Bishop g7, h3, castle, bishop e3. This setup is very harmonious, but now with pawn and a4, without a5, a6 inclusion, black has an extra option, knight a5 or knight e7 and c5. First of all, if he goes king h7, the idea of pushing f5 is what I learned as a kid in these structures, where bishop is here and knight is here. But frankly, it's unrealistic. Let's say a5, a6, rook e1. If let's say knight g8, we just go d4. We always strike in the center as soon as he's ready to go f5, and he just never has the time because de is going to be a big disaster. And also these pawns are going to be much too shaky. You can only do this f5 push if position was closed. So let's say in such a position, okay, f5 is going to be very strong, but we're never going to close the center. And after d, yeah, f5 is just not very feasible because it weakens a lot of squares and there is no real avalanche. And the center is just too open. So king h7 plans are not very good, although I believe very likely that the opponent will try. Knight h5, some engines like, with idea rook e1, knight d4. Very strange. We just take with bishop, bishop d4, ed, knight e2, c5, then queen d2. And if king h7, we play, intending maybe f5, we play knight f4, queen f4. f5 doesn't work, very strong response h4, very strong. fe, we have queen d4. And also we threaten actually knight g5 tactic, ag, and then some checkmate here. And that's also there. The computers go bishop e6, now b3, and some engines say that this is okay for black, though I find it very hard to believe. I really like our knight. Our knight is not great yet on f3, but it's not as bad as the g7 bishop, and it has definitely potential to roam all around the board and set some problems. So I find this position to be very pretty for white, and yeah, I don't think black is happy with that. So knight h5, knight d4 idea, not too exciting. Yeah, I mentioned that d4 here is a little bit early, though possible. Let's say after takes, and there's some queen g5, knight f4 counterplay, and okay, I think white could play queen d5, but this stuff is not very much. Yeah, I think so. I was just wondering about knight b5, but I see there are many things, but bishop e6 the easiest. Also bishop d7. Okay, this is a little too off topic. 10 rook e1 is better than 10 d4. Knight a5 is decent. Bishop a2 c5. The engines like having control over the center a lot, so the engines really like the c5 plans, and I think they definitely have a point. Here, there are a lot of different options. And there are a lot of different plans, so we can play on the queen side with knight d5, c3 before, or often also try to play knight d2, knight h2, and then maybe f4, or knight h2, knight g4. There are many different possibilities. So knight d2, knight h2 are some things to consider, but I recommend knight d5. That's the main move. Now, like a trick there down the line, knight c6 back, queen d2, hitting h6 and setting up a little tactic. King h7, knight f6, queen f6, knight g5. Very nice. If hg, we have bishop g5. Queen is trapped suddenly. And if king g8, king h8 is similar to king g8. I didn't see much difference. c3, same thing. King g8, we also go c3. Now, again, black cannot take. If he forces us with queen e7, now he wants to take and move the queen away. Now we can take on f7. Rook f7, bishop f7, queen f7, bishop h6. And we have 2 pawns and the rook for 2 pieces, but very importantly, we get to push f4 next. That's why after bishop d7, we should not do that, because this would lose a tempo. And it's an important tempo, because after takes, and rook to f8, we cannot push f4. And if we cannot push f4, suddenly in this closed position, our rooks have very little value. So bishop d7 is it's entirely different than queen a7, and now that black has this extra tempo, we should just go back, knight f3, king h7, defending the pawn, and now just b4. We start queenside play much earlier than black got to push his f-pawn, so I believe white is doing quite well here. We simply first with our play. Yeah, and then same thing after king h8, c3, pretty much. Queen e7 we take, and bishop d7 we go back. It will just transpose. But also, yeah, knight h2, knight d2 were options. Now knight e7. This is a fascinating move. It looks very weird, but c5 is coming, and compared to knight e5, black doesn't gain a tempo on the bishop, but he does defend this d5 square very well now with these two knights, or control it rather. So decent move. Here too there are a lot of options. For example, a5 was possible, c5, and now I was checking here knight d2 f4, but also interesting idea, bishop d2, ready to meet knight c6 with knight d5, knight d5, defending this pawn. So that was also there, bishop d2, some subtle move. Finally I settled on queen d2, king h7, rook a1. I really like it, bringing all the pieces, very harmonious setup. Everything in the center. Knight h2 f4 next, just everybody ready to party. c5, knight h2. Okay, the most there are a lot of moves here actually that are interesting. So we want to play f4. If black tries to stop it, knight h5, we go g4. Going back, we go f4. We gain a lot of time. The weakness is not a big deal. Our king is very safe, surrounded by knight, rooks, and the queen. King is not in danger at all. Knight f4 is though interesting. Pawn sacrifice. We take. Now g5. Queen d2, knight g6. Black's trying to establish a blockade. We go knight e2, bishop e5, and knight f3. This idea of f4 is a bit too much, sacrificing in exchange. It is pretty though, but it's a bit too much. Black is very comfortable here objectively. So knight f3 is better. Queen f6, knight e5 de, and now we have an interesting position. Let's say f3, and we are up a full pawn. But truth be told, it is not easy to break through. Black has some sort of a blockade, but in the long run we have c3 d4 ideas. So I do think that white is on the good side here. 18 c3, by the way, is also an alternative. Going for d4. Yeah, this is strange pawn sack knight h5. b6 looked very natural to me, intending d5, especially since the knights are placed this way. Now white goes f4, ef, bishop f4, d5, take twice, knight d5, and bishop e5. It's important to neutralize this dark square bishop. f6, now it dropped back. The bishop is very dumb, and if f5, we can always come back. And this position is quite uncomfortable for black. We want to bring the knight back to f3, and if bishop b7, we have rook e6 idea and rook d6. So although this position looks kind of very good for black, already here it looks a lot less good. So bishop e5 is a strong idea to remember. Knight c6, I misspoke. I don't think it's a strong idea to remember. It's a strong idea to know. Once you know these kind of ideas, you will find them yourself again. Knight c6, yeah, this is interesting. Knight is heading back to control d4 square. f4, ef, bishop f4, bishop e6. Black is trying to fight for the d5 square still. And now I really like rook f2. It's a very cunning move. Normally you'd go knight f3 back, but rook f2 is a nice trap. Now after d5, which is very tempting, we take on d5, and if knight d5, we take with the bishop. Bishop takes, knight g4. Suddenly black is just collapsing. h5, there is bishop g5. Stuff is just hanging there because there's an overload on the queen here everywhere. And if g5 and bishop c7, queen e7, rook f6. Of course, queen c7, knight d5 was the idea. Just a fantastic combination. Black is just totally busted. Rook h6 is coming, and knight f6 next. Knight d5 is just losing actually. So you have to go bishop d5, then we take knight d5, knight d5. And c3, we guard the d4 square, and after knight f4, queen f4, we have a very good bishop. We control the e5 square, which is important. If we allowed knight e5, somehow the black would be doing very well, but we don't. Queen d7, rook f2. Knight can come back to f3 or even g4. Black's doing, white is doing well. Sorry, if rook e8, we can win a pawn, so it's not too attractive for black. And if not d5, we can just suggest knight h5. But then if we go bishop e3 back, it's not clear how black gets rid of the weak d6 pawn. We want to bring the knight back to f3, and I believe we have a pleasant position here. Finally, I should still mention move 9, bishop e6. It has been played actually by two strongest players who reached this position, but it's not a good move. And the reason it's not good is that in the structure after takes, the bishop on g7 is not that the bishop is misplaced, but it's that these pawns are weakened. So if black had bishop on e7 and pawns on g7, h7, it would have been better for him. here, yeah, these pawns are soft and it's just ugly. So 92 or a5 first. Yeah, Dubov Kamsky was here a game, and white went a5, a6 first. 92 is identical. a5, a6, 92. He went very nice. Knight gets transferred to g3. As soon as the d5 square is protected, knight has no point on c3, and then we go c3, guarding these two squares. d5 has been played in Dubov Kamsky. Knight g3, queen d6, c3, always good move, guarding these two squares indeed. d4, cd, ed, bishop d2, and Dubov won this game. Black got rid of the doubled pawns, but he didn't get rid of the weaknesses here. King is a bit uncomfortable. Knight h2, f4 is coming. Black's counterplay on queen side is non-existent. Very good position here. And if 12, knight h5, we can move out of the way with knight h2. I like knight h2. But the engine suggests c3. There's no need to walk away. If queen d7, we can push d4. Against this undoubling doesn't help. We have now this pawn is still weak, and all these ones as well. But also knight h2 is possible. I like, to be honest, knight h2. It fits my style a bit more. g3, king g2 is next, neutralizing the knight. Then before here, knight c1, knight b3 is a nice idea against d5. We get the c5 square. Knight h2 I actually like a lot more, to be honest. And even here you can play knight h2. But after c3, rook f3 doesn't work. So I just made sure it doesn't, because gf, queen f6, king g2. Sorry, knight g3. King g2, I guess rook f8 was there. That's why knight g3. Knight f4, bishop f4, ef, knight e2 back. And black doesn't have enough compensation. If knight e5, the engine was saying that the strongest is knight d4, c5, knight c2. Very interesting. It gets quite messy. For example, knight d4, queen g5, king h2, queen h5, knight e6, knight f3, king g2, knight h4, king h1, f3. I was calculating this at some point blindfold while doing something else, and I was kind of struggling, but the engine found the win. Queen b3, king h7, knight g7, king g7, queen b7, and then the queen is in time here to come back to defense. But much easier than knight d4 is just king h1, much more conceptual. Knight is coming to g1, knight f3, knight g1. We gave back one pawn, but after knight g5, king g2, followed by knight f3, let's say rook f8 or something, knight f3, we gain full control of the light squares, and we still have an exchange over a pawn. So yeah, the rook f3 sack doesn't work, and if queen d7, knight h2 I think is nice. And again, 30 knight h2 is also possible. This brings our journey in this chapter to an end. We looked at g5 and also at the g6 setups. Again, easy to remember against all the non-bishop c5 setups. Sorry, g6, not g5. Bishop, such as bishop e7 or h6. We bring the knight to c3 and pawn to a4. That's also here the case. Also here the case, and also here the case. So at least that is easy to remember and understand. And here we look at all the critical options. I believe white has easy play, and yeah, for self-study, this g6 a5 is quite an interesting position that you can always investigate. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next chapter.